In this video, I'm going to describe how Jesus has already returned. This is something that's kind of interesting. In the book of Matthew, we're told in one verse, and we're going to get to that Jesus tells the disciples that before you die, I will return. There are some of you standing here that will not die, that will not taste death. And so he's telling people that I'm going to return before you even die. Yet here we are thousands of years later. What happened? I'm going to tell you something. He did return. People don't know what that means. It's metaphorical. What I'm going to do is play a short clip from a channel called DZ Debates. The title is called Christian Has Tantrum Over Me Reading the Bible Filth. And that's DZ Debates. And what I'm going to do is post just a short sample of this video. And I'm going to talk about, after it's done, I want to talk about how both the atheist and the theist are not getting what's really there and talk about why that is. I'm also going to show two examples in Genesis right off the bat where this has already happened. Return of Christ, return of Jesus, return of God, return of the element that was gone. I will show where this happens repeatedly. It's not just in the book of Matthew. My name is Dan Paulson. Welcome. Let's get started. We'll listen to that video, and then I'll go ahead and comment on it. Again, this is a conversation between two people on another channel. There's a third voice. He's got somebody in the background helping him once in a while. I've tried to cut that out because it's kind of confusing. There's a little bit here and there. Let's get started.
How is Jesus a liar? Go ahead.
Fantastic. I will start easy. We can start in Matthew 16. And then we'll move on from there. Have you read the book of Matthew?
Yeah, some of it. Do I need to get my other phone for this?
Nah, I'll put it on the screen.
Okay.
All right, so this is Jesus talking to some of his disciples. He says, the Son of Man is to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay everybody for what has been done. Truly, I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Now, the question I have is, how many of those people tasted death?
I don't know.
All of them.
Yeah, all of them. Yeah. Did he come back with all the angels and judge everybody?
I mean, he hasn't came back yet, though.
Right. That makes it a lie, yeah, because he says that he's going to do it before all of the people standing there have passed away.
I'm going to interrupt their conversation from time to time because I don't want to get back to it and hash through it extensively. What I want to do at this point, however, is say that the reason these two are not going to agree is because they're calling it or they're treating it as if it is a literal historical event. Now, what I'm going to suggest is that, like a fable, there is a lesson nested in here at a deeper layer, and that if you're reading it literally and trying to describe it literally or to say it's not happening, you're not finding that deeper layer. In order for him to call Jesus a liar, he has to be thinking that there was a true individual named Jesus standing there who was telling this right here. And I'm going to contend that's not the case. There's something metaphorically at a deeper layer that is consistent with other teachings, and it's consistent with an inward path of healing. Let's continue.
What about their descendants? What about the descendants of these people?
What about them?
Okay, their descendants still exist. The whole entire bloodlines couldn't possibly got wiped out.
He didn't say your descendants will be alive. He says there are some literally standing here who will not taste death.
Okay, what you witnessed right there is common. I'm going to talk about this. I don't want to badger the guy calling in. This is just a common technique. And what you saw him go on about their later bloodline or something like that. They're still around. It's like, well, it doesn't, like the guy said, it doesn't say that in there. Okay, so the Bible in a number of places, both Old Testament and New Testament, tells us you do not add to or take away. What you're seeing right here, and I run into the same thing when I'm talking to Christians about Bible and asking them to explain complex things, what they do is they start adding to or taking away from it. They can't explain the story. Once you see somebody adding to or taking away, they don't know what's going on. When you got a theist standing there saying, I have all of the answers, don't pay attention to that part. And this over here really means this over here. And if you put that this and this and that means that, they're putting stuff into it. You just listen to them and go, here's a confident, evolving individual that is wrong. All right, let's get back.
That doesn't prove that he's a liar, though.
It is. Did he say these words?
Standing there means sorry. I just wanted to help you. Sorry.
Okay. Okay, so what is the context of this verse exactly?
The context is he's talking about his second coming.
All right, go to the next item then, because I don't believe this to be true.
Okay, well, interpret the passage. What's it mean if it doesn't mean what it says?
For the Son of the Man is to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, then he will repay everyone for what has been done. Truly I tell you, there is nothing standing here who will not taste death before the seas. Okay, it doesn't change nothing. Like, he's still coming back.
Is it true, though? Is this passage true?
28.
Yes, it's true.
Okay, so then tell me, when did he come back and judge mankind?
He hasn't came back yet.
Okay, then it's a lie, because he says, truly I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death, but they all tasted death.
Well, you're just pulling things out of your, like...
I'm just reading the book. The book says there are some standing here who will not taste death before he comes back again, and then they all tasted death and he didn't come back.
All right, I'll end it right there. We're seeing the individual now trying to take away from it. That doesn't mean that. It doesn't say that. You hit them with the Bible and they can't really argue with it. Okay, so this is very common. Honestly, today I find it more and more difficult to find people who call themselves Christians even talk about the Bible. What they do is they simply just go after. They just do stupid things like tell you how does tell me how life emerges from nothing, and it's like, do you even have a belief? What do you believe? What do you stand on? Here, I got a pile of clay right here. I'm going to watch. Go ahead and pray. Make it come to life. Come on. Still waiting. Yeah, you got nothing. So there's a point where it becomes an exercise in futility to argue back and forth. Now, there's a third layer, and I want to describe how that happens. But what's important to understand is that every one of these stories plays out in the human psyche. It's made in such a way that it is a monomyth or a monotemplate. It's an inner path. It's difficult for people to see it. That is why people don't grasp what is going on with Jesus. I'm going to tell you it's common. Take a look at here. I want you to look at concepts in the background in these comparisons between Jesus, Jason from Greek myth, and King Arthur from Welsh. All right, just look for the concepts. Big pieces here. Not what is different about them, but what is the same that you see. It's going to take a clever mind. Okay? That's why we don't see these. It takes you have to look carefully. A certain brain can see it. Jesus is called as the Son of God, has supernatural powers, travels with hand-picked disciples, and seeks the kingdom of heaven within. Jason is called as the rightful ruler of the kingdom, has Hera for supernatural powers, travels with the Argonauts, and seeks the golden fleece. King Arthur is called as the only one who could extract Excalibur, has Merlin for supernatural powers, travels with hand-picked knights, and seeks the Holy Grail. The first Star Wars trilogy was made on that template. There's videos up on that. Luke is called as the son of Vader, has the Force for supernatural powers, travels with special select rebels, and seeks to save the Alliance by destroying the Death Star. And notice that they all feature a doubter or a problem in their midst of travelers. Judas, Lancelot, C-3PO, Acostus, son of Pelias, and spy, sails with Jason. So each one of them has a doubter in the midst. Or not necessarily a doubter, but a problem nevertheless. Lancelot wasn't a doubter, but was nevertheless a problem to Arthur and his queen. Do you see that? Do you know why that is? There's a reason for that too. Okay. So if you see that pattern, that should tell you something right now. Something else is going on. Now, I said it's happened before. It's not Christ's return, but Christ is what? God, same as God? So let's go earlier, where before Christ, there was God, and God returned. What I have up here is Genesis, King James Version right here. And we have the creation going on. What I'm going to point out something here is that there is a point where God disappears and a point where God returns. Now, when Jesus says, I'm going to leave and that I'm going to return, it's going to represent the same thing on a human life template. They're not going to sound the same. The same way that an anchored ship cannot sail does not sound the same as a goat chained to the tree cannot run away. They don't sound the same, or do they? They're both something that is tied that cannot escape. That represents us. I'm the ship, or I'm the goat, and whatever I'm tied to, I cannot escape it. That's how these teachings work. Okay, so what we have going on here is actually at the end of the Cain and Abel story. When we get down to verse 16, Cain has just been sent off. He killed Abel, and God is protecting him at the same time telling him, yeah, go off and live on your own. 16, and Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. This is the first this shows up in Jewish works, in current Jewish works. I'm sure it shows up in older stuff that is not here, that is not in Genesis. There's a lot of Jewish material that is not here. Most of it is not here. Okay, so right here we have God, the presence of the Lord is a separation. Now, when we get down here, what happens is there's this kind of a lineage that goes on. There's a Enoch is taken out of this, what goes on. There's another division that takes place. And down here is when men begin to call upon the name of the Lord. So what we are to understand here, if we take it literally, is that at some point, God got things going and then just completely disappeared and left it untended. And it just went its own way. And here men began to call upon the name of the Lord. That wasn't even enough. That he didn't even come back. We've got a lineage, time goes by. Not till we get down here to chapter 6, when there's a corruption and the earth that needs to be destroyed, does God return. Right here. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man, and that I have created from the face of the earth both man and beast, and the creeping things and the fowls of the air, for it grieves me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Right there, Noah is called on a monomyth, he's the called hero, Noah right here. And what's going to happen? He's going to go through a destruction of the earth and emerge purified on the other side. So God left and God returned. God returned in time to effect a healing of the earth. God is the higher awareness. That is what we actually are, yet we live through our memories. And when he says, and God saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. How's your head feel? Does it swim? Turmoil? Turn? That's what they're talking about here. We've got to resolve this stuff. So God returned at this point. It's hard to see that correlation, but when Jesus says, I'm going to return, he does. Every time somebody follows his path. We're going to get there, though. Let's find one other part where God disappears and God returns. So the first part of Genesis here, down 1 through 11, up to the Babel story, looks to me like the original older part. But then when it goes on from 12 and it picks up where the Abram and Sarai story began, let's take a look at what happens there. All right, chapter 12 is where that happens. That's where the Lord God said to Abram, he's going to call, this is the very first calling right here. It's also the beginning of what we know today as the Abrahamic traditions. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all share this as their common starting point. So this right here is the very first, well, Noah was first. As we get underway, this becomes the ongoing path from the Abrahamic traditions, however. So Abraham is the first prophet of the Abrahamic religion, not the first Jewish prophet by any means. But yeah, it's not called Noahism, it's called Abrahamic traditions. So, all right. So he's calling him, I'm going to make a great nation. There's a calling going on right here. I will bless those that bless you and curse those that curse you. Everything good and bad comes from the same place. It doesn't matter. And this is how life really works. I'm treating this very matter-of-factly. Like, yes, it works this way, but it's not God that's making it happen. It's natural. So Abram departed as the Lord spoke to him, and Lot went with him. And he took his wife Sarai and Lot his brother and their substance, and they had gotten into the land of Canaan. However, there's a famine in the land of Canaan. The Lord appeared to Abram. He told him, I'll give this seed all of your land. And there he built an altar who appeared to him. Now, this means that all of your seed, unto all of your seed means all of your decisions, all of your choices. The land is going to be your mind. This is your experience, your life experience. Every time you're reading through here and you find a spot where it says, unto your seed I will give this land, or, as many as stars in the sky, or as sand on the beach, or eyes on the four sides that are numerous in the Ezekiel story. All of those large numbers of things represent your memories, your judgments. The four agreements, your agreements, all of that. That means you get to take charge of your life, and whatever you decide is going to be yours. Is it good or bad? And you know what? It's very important here to say, when you're using terms like this, decision doesn't mean simply I make a conscious decision. There are things that happen to me that are bad that I did not decide that I wanted them to happen, so I don't categorize that the same way. We can't manage it that way. The decision means I've made a judgment in life, and I've put an emotional memory with it that's going to continue actually to grow and get bigger and act out, whether I did something or something happened to me. That right there, we're making decisions, but we're doing so without our conscious awareness of it. We may not like something and we go, God, I judged this way and I hate it and I remember it. And we've just created one of those memories. We're going to do that. They're going to be numerous. We're born. We are Abram. Sarai is our inner self, pure, uncorrupt, coming from a place like Eden. Nothing there to eat. It's a pure place. Eden, there is some place to eat, but you're not supposed to eat it. You do anyway. All right, so what we have here is he removed from thence unto a mountain on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent, having Bethel on the west and Hai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. So he called upon the name of the Lord right there in the same way that the name of the Lord was called upon up above. However, what we're going to see is without there being an announcement, is that the Lord just disappears. The Lord does one thing in here, sends plagues. And the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues. But the Lord isn't there, didn't stop it, didn't anything like that. This again is representative of something. This represents ourselves. This represents our early life and us going off and being corrupted by life and our inner self picking up qualities as a result, and we're going to get sent on our way. This is a normal stage on a life cycle template right here, but it's held in a way that makes it sound like, some weak man and his, kind of slutty wife were willing to go out and trade her for slaves and animals, which is really horrific. But if you look at it and say, no, that represents each one of us, and it's metaphorical, and it represents that we've gone off and lived life from a place where we had nothing to begin with. We went off and lived life and we became corrupted, and now we're having plagues or cyclical pain as a result. That's what is really happening here. But God, the Lord, is gone. Never announces it, doesn't say anything. Now there's going to be communications between Lord and Abram as time goes on, but it's not the Lord. It is visions or angel of the Lord or something like that. Here, for all the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, saying, fear not. You see, it's all in visions or something like that. The word of the Lord came to him saying. You see, it's all the communication between Lord and Abram is not face to face until we get down to 17. And what we have is Abram is converted into Abraham. This represents the calling. All right, so this is very important to understand. It's not the nature of this video right here because it gets too big. But Abram and Sarai represents each one of us starting out in life, how everything is pure to begin with. We go on in life, we become corrupted. All the stories happen showing how life happens along the way. But at the point where God returns or the Lord returns and communicates with Abram and says, I am now converting you to Abraham and Sarah. What this represents is a different iteration of us. Abram and Sarai was us living a life unaware that we're just judging life. We become Abraham and Sarah when we realize that and go, oh, now it's time to start healing and working and going on an inner pathway. So that's what's happening in the story, the way that it is on the template. If you understand it's on the template and treat it that way, you got it. If you don't, it's not. It's just going to be weird. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram right there. When it's time for the calling, the Lord appears again. And that's exactly what that is. And when Jesus is saying, when I will return, that's it. It's the calling. It is the calling that he's returning to, which means what? Look at it this way. If you know Buddhism, there's this idea that Buddha taught how to find inner enlightenment, and he taught that path, and that we're supposed to follow that path, that everybody has a Buddha nature, and that is a pure state, and if you can accomplish that in your lifetime and find that a way to rid the turmoil of the memories that you live through, you achieve a state of nirvana. And that's your Buddha nature. Now, sacrilegiously sounding, we have exactly the same thing happening in Jesus' work, though. Jesus is teaching the same thing as Buddha. However, the carrier shell has a completely different impact than the Buddhism religion does. Buddhism turns inward and looks to the mind. Christianity, or Abrahamic, looks outward to space, to a supernatural creation, without looking into the mind where it really is. That's the carrier shell. If you invert that story, God is that higher awareness. I am the people in this story. Jesus is, or the Lord, saying there are people that will not taste the death. What is death? Death is a good thing. Death is a spiritual thing. In this case, though, what he's suggesting is that you will not die before you find the path to inner peace. It's not really that you will not physically die. That's how you would interpret that in the physical world. That's what's happening in that video where these guys are arguing back and forth over that. And it's like, you're never going to accomplish anything there. And guess what? Jesus is never going to physically return, because this is a metaphorical idea that every time you find your Christ nature, that you find the kingdom of heaven within, in the same way that you would find your Buddha nature, that you find nirvana. Those are metaphorically the same things, although people want them to be something that is an eternal life package that determines how they live their life, whether or not they live in fear or not. The religion, however, becomes also very tribal. Okay, so, all right, does that wrap it up in this video? Let me make sure I've got this straight then. When we go to Genesis, we see that God disappears in a story, in a life cycle. When you go through these, you're going to find God disappears, and when it's time for a healing, God reappears. When you find a monomyth, you're going to find that they reconnect with God right in the beginning, so-and-so called by God, Enoch or Ezekiel or any of them. So there's a reconnection with God at that moment, and that represents the reconnection to the higher awareness. Eckhart Tolle talks about it as far as his night where he's in turmoil. He finally gets the idea that he's sitting there in his mind at 3, 4 in the morning, just frazzled, and he's got the inner dialogue going on, and he says, I can't live with myself. But then he wonders, who is it that can't live with myself? What is going on in here? And he begins to realize that there's multiple things going on. And eventually what it works out is exactly what this material teaches, that we start out in life very happy, living from a higher awareness, but as life goes on, we begin to live through our memories. And that represents the corruption that happens to us as life goes on, and the cyclical pain as a result. Now I'm getting triggered all the time, and life just is not okay. So when the return happens is when you go, oh, you know what? I'm a product of my memories. I don't live through those. I am the higher awareness up here. Bingo. We just had the return of Christ, the return of God. This is the idea that I'm reconnecting with this part of something out in the universe that is not my memories. It's bigger than me. That's reconnecting with God, and not many people are going to do that. And the return of Christ happens whenever somebody figures that out and turns inward. So when Eckhart Tolle said, oh, I've got it. That's not who I am. That was the return of Christ right there. For me, at some point in time in my life where I go, damn it, I'm living through my memories and my judgments. And they hurt. But if I sit here from a different position mentally and go, I observe this from a different location, this is the real me. Those are my memories that I'm living through. Bingo. The return of Christ happens right there. So the return of Christ happens continuously. It happens all the time. It happens metaphorically, however, in the verbiage. What's really physically happening is an individual's awareness. They start taking that path. Whenever you take the path, this inward path, to inner peace, and you have to understand Jesus. When Buddha tells you to seek emptiness, Christians will go, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And you go, well, right off the bat, Jesus said, become poor in spirit, for yours is the kingdom of God. What the hell is that? Poor in spirit? Seek emptiness. What is spirit? How can your spirit be poor? You are living through your memories. You need to dissolve this. Seek emptiness. Seek poor in spirit. Same thing. When you figure that out, Christ returned. My videos are long, I know, but the material is very deep, and we're not very familiar with it. We have to spend a little time with it. This concept first appears in the Babylonian creation myth, the Enuma Elish, which was just previous to Genesis. It was they were coexisting, they were sharing things. The called hero here, Marduk, his name is said 41 times. If we go to Genesis and check on Noah, 41 times the called hero. There's going to be similarities that show these are coexisting, and they're working together in the background to create religions for a population. But there's still something in here that is the pathway out. Okay, what we have here is Apsu, who is their source, and the progenitor Tiamat, the mother who gave birth to all, intermingled their waters, producing neither field nor marsh. At a time when no divine beings had yet come into existence, the gods were given birth within those intermixing waves. The first were Lamu and Lahamu. It's going to sound different. That Lamu and Lahamu would be the same thing as Adam and Eve if you were in Genesis material. This is the first male-female component. And then they're going to become mature of form. They were born Anshar and Kishar. That's going to be like Cain and Abel. And then they outshone them, and so many days passed by and so many years were counted. Go to Genesis. What do you find next? You find like a lineage, an analog form. Yeah, time goes by. You see the patterns in here. But what happens very quickly is we get down here, things go bad, and abounding sleep overcame Apsu. He became pacified. It's the creator. It caused him to enter a deep sleep. This is representing an early idea that we are losing connection with this higher self. The early self takes over, Ea, and took his mantle of brilliance and dressed himself in it. So he's taken, this is early self taken over and saying, I'm in charge, and forced Apsu down under his feet and crushed him. So Apsu has been destroyed. The creator has been destroyed. That doesn't happen in Jewish work. But in Jewish work, what happens? God just moseys off. Nobody has to destroy him. He just says, I'm going to go golfing for a while with, I don't know, Buddha and Muhammad here or something. And he just disappears from the scene. And then Mosey's back when it's time for the called hero. So what happens is Marduk does take his shape from Apsu. And at some point, let's see, it's going to be down here ways. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on it. Tiamat caused more harm for him. Oh, we're still in chapter 2. So eventually Apsu is back into the scene. And it's at the time after Marduk, who is the called hero, destroys Tiamat. So what we're seeing is God, in the beginning, is the creating element, disappears, and then reappears at the same time that the calling begins. No matter how that happens, whether it's God walks off on his own or God is trapped away, what we're seeing right there is the idea that the higher awareness is gone for that time of our life. And when we want to turn inward, we must reconnect with that. That's the first thing we have to do. The monomyth is greater. We have to turn inward. We've got to defeat demons. There's a lot we must do, but we have to connect with that element first. The return of Christ happens every time somebody figures that out. So I don't know if you can see that element. Heaven, kingdom of heaven within. It's a mental pure space. Jesus is saying, I'm going to go to heaven and I will return at some point in time. Okay, well, that represents the idea that this pureness is there, but when it's time for you to go on the adventure, you are the person that becomes that right there. That is the return. Whether you are Marduk and you need to reconnect with Apsu, whether you are Noah and you need to reconnect with Yahweh, or whether you are disciples and you need to reconnect with Yeshua. In all cases, they're doing the same thing. You are reconnecting with a higher self at that point. And in one case, it's just being held in such a way that makes it sound like if you wait for this physical thing to happen, it will happen. Yet here we go. Years go by. People still wait. They still argue. Guy like that on the video, he's like angry. It's like, well, read the damn Bible. But don't add to it. Don't take away from it. That means you must interpret it. Everything is there that you need if you interpret it. If you don't interpret it, you're going to be adding to it or taking it away or taking away or saying, I don't even want to read it. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to understand it. Well, okay. I'm going on a rant now. I'll end that there. Jesus returns all the time whenever somebody figures out the path. Everybody waiting for the physical return? You're standing outside the narrow gate. You have to enter in. And quite honestly, at some point you're watching a video like this one where I'm watching a theist and an atheist very seriously go at it. One of them obviously very unknowledgeable, one of them very knowledgeable but very literal. In a case right there, you're seeing that the carrier case is being called true. The wrapping paper, this is true, and somebody's saying it's not true. That is what's going on back and forth. Meanwhile, neither one of them are interpreting it. It's as if you're watching somebody argue about whether or not that race between the tortoise and the hare really happened or not, without either side understanding that there's a moral to this story. That's exactly what it's like. There is something in here that is a spiritual pathway that is not being understood by those who treat it literally or those who argue and say it's not literal. It isn't literal. You're right, at least. But there's something there that you're completely missing. Completely missing. It's only for a few, apparently. All right. Hope this was interesting. See you in the next video.